A blessed day to everyone. I am Chris Ansares who will be discussing a chapter in Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, which is one of the most famous literary works in the European literature. War and Peace is a novel written by the author Leo Tolstoy. By the way, what is a novel? Well, a novel is a narrative work of prose fiction that tells a story about a specific human experiences over a considerable length. And with that, of course, novel is longer than a short story because it contains or it is divided in many chapters. This is a kind of book or novel that you shouldn't read in bed because if you fall asleep, it could give you a concussion or a traumatic brain injury because of its length and its content. And before we open this book, let us get to know first the author behind this masterpiece. Leo Tolstoy is the author of this novel. His original or Russian name is Count Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy. He was born on September 9, 1828 in Tula Province, Russia. His parents are Nikolai Tolstoy and Maria Tolstaya, and he died in Astapovo, Russia on November 20, 1910. Leo Tolstoy is a Russian writer and a Christian anarchist. When we say Christian anarchist, it means that he is a pacifist who renounced the state as violent and deceitful. He is regarded as one of the greatest authors of all time, a master of realist fiction, and one of the world's greatest novelists because of his novels Anna Karenina and of course War and Peace. These novels are commonly regarded as among the finest novels ever written. For the author's earlier years, well, Tolstoy is born in an aristocratic family or an ancient noble family. That's why he is commonly addressed as a count, as in Count Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy. His mother died before he was 2 years old, and his father followed her in 1837. Then 11 months later, his grandmother died, and then next it is his aunt Alexandra in 1841. He has a very tough life, but despite the constant presence of death among his family members, he still remembered his childhood in idyllic terms. It means that it is a pleasant, simple, and peaceful family. Tolstoy started to write some of his works when he joined the army in 1851, and in 1901 he was excommunicated in the Russian Orthodox Church. He is also drawn to the writings of the English novelist Lawrence Stearns and Charles Dickens, and especially to the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He is really into Rousseau because he even wore a medallion with a portrait of Rousseau instead of a cross. And as I have said earlier, Leo Tolstoy is a great author, and these are some of his works or most notable works. In the first bullet, semi-autobiographical trilogy of childhood, boyhood, and youth. It means that this trilogy is more on about his own life, his biography from his childhood to his youth. The second bullet is the Sevastopol Sketches. This contains the 3 short stories that records Tolstoy's experiences during the siege of Sevastopol, followed by his other works of Family Happiness, A Confession, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, The Kingdom of God is Within You, Resurrection, After the Ball, Haji Murad, up to his novels War and Peace and Anna Karenina. These 2 novels share a vision of human experiences rooted in an appreciation of everyday life and prosaic virtues. Now let's proceed with the novel. War and Peace. War and Peace is a historical novel, originally published as Wojna i Mir in 1865 to 1869. It is a panoramic study of early 19th century Russian society. It is noted for its mastery of realistic detail and variety of psychological analysis. It is a masterwork of the Russian literature and one of the world's greatest novels. War and Peace is a long book that deals with a thrilling examination of history. It contains some of the most realist characters that you'll find anywhere. This novel contains three kinds of material, or it is divided in three structural divisions. The first one is the biographies of fictional characters. Like any other literary works, this contains fictional characters with of course their fictional biographies. The second one is historical account of Napoleonic Wars. It includes the different wars that happened during the invasion of Napoleon Bonaparte in Russia in 1812. And in the third bullet, it contains set of essays about the philosophy of war and history. Lastly, the novel contains sets of essays about the philosophy of war and history by the author Leo Tolstoy. War and Peace is also known for its realism, something Tolstoy achieved through intensive research. He visited battlefields, read history books on the Napoleonic Wars, and drew on real historical events to create a novel of living history. This novel contains 361 chapters with 1,225 pages in the first published edition. And with those chapters, there are 559 characters. If the length and the number of chapters bothered or discouraged you in reading the novel, just imagine how Leo Tolstoy felt in writing it. So now let's proceed with the characters of the novel. The principal characters of the novel are from these families: the Besukhovs, the Bolkonskis, the Rustovs, the Koragins, and the Drubetskoys. War and Peace broadly focuses on Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812 and follows three of the most well-known characters in literature. Pierre Besukhov, the illegitimate son of a count who is fighting for his inheritance and yearning for spiritual fulfillment. The second character is Prince Andrei Bolkonsky, who leaves his family behind to fight in a war against Napoleon. And the last one is Natasha Rostov, the beautiful young daughter of a nobleman who intrigues both men. The novel's point of view is in the third-person omniscient point of view, wherein the author is the narrator himself. He knows the ins and outs of his characters. For the setting, the place or the country and the year the events happen in the novel is in the country of Russia in the early 1800s. Let's now talk about the summary of the book first. By the way, I'm not going to read it all. I'll just give you a very short summary of the novel. Well, War and Peace started on the eve of war between France and Russia. The aristocrats at the cocktail party is anxious about the emerging violence, followed by the topics where aristocrats always seem to care about, like money, sex, and death. The novel at first focuses on the everyday life among the Russian nobility, while Napoleon Bonaparte and his grand army march across Europe. The story shifts to the battlefield after the Russians became involved in a war. From then on, the action alternates between scenes of war and scenes of peace. Then occasionally, Tolstoy, the author, interrupts the story to philosophize about war. The climax of the novel occurs at the Battle of Borodino and during its immediate aftermath. When the main Russian characters attain the knowledge and insight they have been seeking, and, the, and Napoleon discovers he had made a colossal blunder, or an embarrassing or tactless act or remark. It is the climax, so I choose the chapters that presents the Battle of Borodino. And since this battle is presented in detail, it includes many chapters. The battle is presented in Book 10, chapters 26 to 39, 26 to 39, or Volume 3, Part 2, chapters 26 to 39. You might notice that there are two references, but both of them are correct. They just differ because there are many translations of the novel. Now, let me read to you the summary of the Battle of Borodino. Summary of the chapters 26 to 39, Battle of Borodino. Napoleon's answer to an adjutant is, "No prisoners," for he believes the Russians are working their own destruction. When his toilet is finished, he composes his face to simulate tenderness, and unwraps a new portrait of his son, called the King of Rome. Then he dramatically asks to have the painting removed, for the tender-aged child should not have to gaze on a battlefield. Having inspected the disposition of his troops, Napoleon draws up an impressive list of orders. These orders seem very competent and military, writes Tolstoy, but none will be carried out. Some are impossible to begin with. Others do not correspond with the situation they were designed for, since unforeseen changes always occur during the heat of battle. Indeed, Tolstoy adds, Napoleon was so far from the scene of the battle that he knew nothing of what was happening. The author shows Napoleon playing the role of military leader, when in fact, such a role is impossible to play once the battle has begun. After a final inspection of his lines, Napoleon declares, "The pieces are on the board. The game will begin tomorrow." Fear awakens to the noise of cannons booming and longs to be in the midst of the smoke and the noise. On the faces of Kutuzov and his men, fear finds the latent heat of patriotism and the composure of men who face death. As the battle waxes, Bezukov sees the latent heat gleam brighter in the eyes of those around him, and feels it burning within himself. Soldiers are now falling all about him and cannonballs hit nearby targets. He himself is knocked down by the force of a near explosion. Panic, he dashes back to the safety of the battery, but the men are gone and again silent. All about are corpse. The battle will stop now, Pierre thinks, for they will be horrified at what they have done. But the booming goes on while the sun climbs to its zenith. By the middle of the day, Napoleon receives reports that all say the same thing. The weak Russians stand steady while the French dissolve and flee. All his officers are asking for reinforcements, and he feels suddenly involved in a bad dream. His concern in all previous battles was to choose the various ways of success, but against these Russians, of whom not a single corps has been captured, not a flag or cannon taken in 2 months, he can only consider the possibilities of failure. From his view on battlement, he sees his is a massacre, not a battle, and is slowly defeated. He turns back to Shevardino. Kutuzov has remained in the same place since morning. He issues no orders, but simply assents to or disapproves of whatever is proposed to him. His old age has shown him battles are not won by commanders, but by the intangible force called the spirit of the army, and he merely follows the force and leads it as far as it placed in his power to lead. When an adjutant general reports that the battle is lost at all points, Kutuzov becomes furious and quickly pens an order to be sent all along the lines. "Tomorrow we attack." The weary soldiers pass the message along, feeling confirmed by the highest command in what they wish to believe. They take heart and courage anew. Prince Andrei's regiment, under heavy fire all day, is ordered to stand by inactive. The men carry off their wounded, close up ranks once more, and await death. A grenade drops among them, and to set an example, Andrei remains standing, gazing at the object of his death sputtering a few paces away. Bolkonsky is filled with love for the grass and earth and air. The explosion flings him into the air, and he lands in a pool of his own blood. At the sight of the battlefield heaped with dead and wounded, Napoleon's phantasm of life is momentarily replaced by personal, human sentiment as he imagines the agonies and death for himself. To take personal responsibility or personal interest in that carnage is too much for him. This would admit the vanity of all his strivings. He must return to his comfortable fantasy. Consider it insignificant that 5 Russian corps lie for each French one, that he is battling for the welfare of his people and the nations of Europe, and that he controls the destiny of millions. Borodino has blood-soaked ground for 2 acres. Thousands lie dead. Borodino is not a physical victory, since half the Russian force is disabled, but it is a moral one. The Russians have stood and barred the way to Moscow, while the French, superior in arms and men, would merely have had to put in a little extra effort to overcome the weak resistance. They could not do this, Tolstoy declares, for their moral force was exhausted in face of the steadfast defenders. Borodino foreshadows the inevitability of the French defeat, now that they meet a foe of a stronger spirit. The long description of the Battle of Borodino immerses us completely in the war area of Tolstoy's novel, no longer concerned with the personal conflict within the souls of specific characters. Tolstoy extends his writings to include the national struggle and the moral force generated on a national scale. Prince Andrei and Pierre disposed of their personal past and fused themselves with the whole of the Russian force. In these chapters, we find none of the romance between the characters, but only the carnage and life and death. Seriousness of steadfast Russians at Borodino. This is the battle that galvanizes the defenders into a powerful definition of the Russian spirit and Napoleon's downfall presages Napoleon's downfall. This is where Napoleon is blinded by considering his will free, thus hastening the destruction of his army. Here the self-forgetful commander Kutuzov bows the necessity and guides an spirited Russian force to victory. The novel broadly focuses on Napoleon's invasion of Russia, especially on the specific chapters that I have chosen. But now, who is really Napoleon Bonaparte? Napoleon Bonaparte said that, "Until you spread your wings, you'll have no idea how far you can fly." This means that you can do and have whatever you want to have and do, but only if you are fearless, only if you are brave enough to spread your wings and accept or take every possibilities and opportunities that comes to your way. Just like him. Because he is not afraid to spread his wings, Napoleon Bonaparte became a French military general, the first emperor of France, and one of the world's greatest military leaders. Let's go back with the Battle of Borodino. The Battle of Borodino in the novel War and Peace depicts the actual Battle of Borodino that happened on September 7, 1812, between the Grand Army of Napoleon Bonaparte and the Imperial Army of Russia. In the novel, the Imperial Army of Russia won against the Grand Army of Bonaparte, but in the actual battle recorded in history, Napoleon Bonaparte won the Battle of Borodino. Actually, in the actual battle recorded in history, there are arguments that Russians won the battle, because the casualties in both parties are the same. But in the end, the Grand Army of Napoleon Bonaparte were acknowledged to have won the Battle of Borodino because they were able to enter Moscow. This battle has a great impact on Napoleon's army, and it is evident that even if they won, it is as if they'd also lost because of the casualties. Among all the wars that Napoleon Bonaparte had in history, the Battle of Borodino is considered to be the bloodiest day of Napoleonic Wars because it involves more than 250,000 troops and resulted in at least 70,000 total casualties. And these are some of the scenes that happened during the Battle of Borodino. Now let's proceed with the lessons from the novel War and Peace. The first one is seize the moments of happiness, love and be loved. That is the only reality in the world. All else is folly. Folly. Above all, War and Peace is a celebration of life. Tolstoy wrote it in the realistic era, and as such, life is depicted in all its aspects: happiness and sadness, love and hate. The book or novel makes you cry and it makes you laugh, and that is prize wisely the effect that Tolstoy wished to have upon his readers. These lines reminds us that we have to choose to be happy as often as possible. Remember, you don't need a reason to be happy. We have to take and seize every opportunities we can have to become happy. It's like great opportunities don't come every day. So recognize and seize them with every chance you get. Next, drain the blood from men's veins and put in water instead. Then there will be no more war. As the title suggests, without war, there is no peace. It's like without hot, there is no cold. Life is full of contradictions, and that is what gives its flavor. War does not only bring out the worst in people, it can also bring out the best in people. Like in the actual battle in Borodino in history. The battle in Borodino symbolizes the national courage of Russians. That even if it would cost their lives, Russians courageously protect their land, their country from the colonizers or from the army of Napoleon Bonaparte. And the last but not the least, while there is life, there is happiness. We all make mistakes. We all struggle with certain life questions. But the trick is to accept that there isn't always an answer and to move on. We all lose and fail to do the things that we want, but what matters is we should never surrender. We should keep moving until we reach our goal or achieve what we want. For as long as there is life, there is hope. As long as we are alive, we can achieve the happiness we want in our life. Many critics are saying that this book or novel, War and Peace, is not a novel, not an epic poem, and not a total historical record. War and Peace is what the author wanted and was able to express it in the form in which it is expressed. So in short, it is the sum total of Tolstoy's imaginative power and nothing less. The novel War and Peace is more than a novel. It's a reflection of Leo Tolstoy's strongly held beliefs, a philosophical tract not just about politics, war, love, marriage, and property, but about history itself and the way the affairs of society are reported. So, that would be the end of my lesson. I hope that you understand it and I hope that I have given you enough information and encourage you to read and have a glimpse of the novel War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. And if you have any questions or clarifications regarding the topic, please feel free to ask me. Again, that's all. Thank you for listening. And now let's proceed with the next literary work of the European literature, which will be discussed by Miss Mary Joy de la Vega. Again, thank you for listening.